Anyway, we got two more things to get into before we go. One has to do with Jim Ross. One has to do with Mauro Ranallo. Mish, which one would you like to talk about first?
Let's go with the Jim Ross one first.
Okay. Jim Ross, I thought the question to Jim Ross was a little weird. Somebody asked him, should Shawn Michaels' super kick move or Jake Roberts' DDT, should that be a protected move? Almost like a finisher only. And the funny thing is, when I heard that question, I immediately thought back to ECW, where Tommy Dreamer used to hit DDTs all the time. And I remember RVD beautifully bouncing his head off the mat from it. So the DDT wasn't always just a straight-up finisher. But why that was brought up, that was weird. But Jim Ross's response was interesting. And it triggered a lot of people in AEW. I'm going to read it, and we'll give our views on it, because there's two things that really caught my eye that people, I don't think, one, people aren't realizing, but the second one, I want to make more of a statement. But Jim Ross's answer about those two moves, he said that the evolution of the business is bullshit. The vulgarity is from Jim Ross, by the way. The evolution of the business is bullshit. He feels those moves should be protected. The DDT is a finisher. The super kick is now just a part of the flow of a match. Nobody wins with it. What does that say to you? Does that say that guys back in the day were more proficient delivering a DDT or a super kick than this generation where things are evolving? Then he says, I want some proof of that shit. I want someone to prove to me that the changing of the wrestling business is what it is today and it's making a difference. I say no. I told the kid the other day at AEW that everybody does the same fucking spot. Jim Ross's words. All you guys go outside, you cluster up like quails, you stand there in a huddle, friends and foes together, side by side, so you could catch some leaping idiot going over the top rope who never wins with the move. They're looking for the holy shit chant. They love to hear this is awesome. It is a spot, folks. It's a trapeze act. I don't buy into that. The DDT is a great finisher and should be used as such. So that pissed off a lot of people in AEW.
Of course it did. Of course it did. But here's the reality of what Jim Ross said, whether people dissected it like this or not. It's not the fact that these people use the moves like water. It's the fact that they make themselves look ineffective with these moves that have been the cornerstone of finishers for years. Shawn Michaels hit somebody with a super kick and it was over. Jake hit somebody with a DDT and it's over. The Young Bucks hit somebody with a super kick and then they hit them with another super kick and then they hit them with another super kick. And it doesn't devalue the super kick, in my opinion. It devalues the talent and makes them look like a bunch of weak simps. The reality is that a lot of these tiny guys are out there executing these moves for, like what JR said, is for those big pops from the audience and stuff like that, but it makes them look weak. What's more devastating? A guy who can perform a DDT once and win the match, or a guy that has to do it 15 fucking times in a row before then he sets up his opponent for the finisher? It's not rocket science, you know?
Well, I'll say a couple of things. Number one, I remember us talking about the X Division, where they would have a whole bunch of people in the match and everybody was like Undertaker. They would get hit with a finisher and then it would pop right back up because they wanted to hit their finisher. So this goes back, 20 years almost, So what Jim Ross said is nothing new. Number two, Brandon Cutler, which really, doesn't have, that much stature as far as in-ring. He's been wrestling for a while, but he took offense to it, and he is the one person who publicly spoke out on it and basically just used a little sarcasm. He went on Twitter and he wrote, because for people that don't know, this is one of the matches for Wednesday. Talk about an absolute clusterfuck. I don't even know why all these people are teaming together. You have the Inner Circle, which makes sense. They're taking on Best Friends, Top Flight, the Varsity Blondes, and Brandon Cutler. I don't know why those 7 guys are teaming up against the Inner Circle. But Brandon Cutler went on his social media and he said, and I quote, 7 versus 7, we're going to go outside, cluster up. He wrote coils because he's just reading someone's recap. Jim Ross said quails, but every goof on the websites all wrote coils. What is mattress coils? It didn't even make sense. It was quails. But he writes 7 on 7. We're going to go outside, cluster up like coils, stand there in a huddle, friends and foes together side by side to catch some leaping idiot off the top rope. I can't wait. And hopefully for 1 million viewers. Let's fucking go. Now,
he's right about that, dude. I cannot. I don't know. Aren't you sick of the everybody standing together to catch somebody?
This is what I have to say about it. I give Brandon Cutler credit for speaking out. But there was some other goof website that said that they got a quote from someone in AEW and they didn't reveal a name. I don't buy any of that shit because Jim Ross was man enough to put it behind his name. Brandon Cutler was man enough to put what he said behind his name. If another website says, oh, we got this quote from this person in AEW who keeps their name anonymous, that person is a pussy, in my opinion. And 9 times out of 10, it is a bullshit quote. You don't know if somebody actually said that in AEW. I could come up in here and say, hey, I got a DM today about this, and person in AEW wishes to remain anonymous, says that, Jim Ross is, veteran. And I can say all this stuff, and you have no way of knowing if it's true or not. My point is that if anybody's going to be outspoken, they should have the balls to put their name behind it. But let me also say this. What people failed to miss the point is that Jim Ross was not talking about AEW. He happened to talk to somebody in AEW the other day and mentioned it. We just had that in War Games. I complained about it, where you had, Io Shirai climb the top with the garbage pail, and everybody's down there and they're looking like this. We talked about it with the Undisputed Era versus McAfee's team. We talk about it on a lot of AEW matches where everybody's there and they're waiting to catch it. I am sick of that shit because the camera work is pathetic. If you know they're going to do a spot like that, the camera work should not be on the guys, because if you replay it and you look at only the guys outside the ring, you see them. They're not even hitting each other. They're like trying to get in the position and they're like this.
Right, they're shoving.
Yeah, and you look at it and like, what are they doing? I mean, me and Yim rolling around in the ring like a fish looked like it made more sense. So Jim Ross is spot on. I say this. In this day and age, wrestlers do not respect people from yesteryear. Even if you're offended by what Jim Ross says, the proper thing to do is keep your mouth shut, and you got to listen to some of the veterans who paved the way for you. Maybe not in the ring for Jim Ross, but Jim Ross was 100% right. But Jim Ross was not shitting on AEW. Jim Ross works for AEW. So Jim Ross doesn't have the opportunity to tell somebody in NXT about what they did at War Games. He doesn't have the opportunity to say it to someone who's on the WWE roster right now. He works for AEW, so he could only say it to somebody in AEW. But he was talking in a journalistic sense. Every promotion is guilty of that god-awful catch me.
That's the problem. How many people in all of these promotions are guilty of exactly what Jim Ross was talking about?
Everybody's guilty of it.
But that's what I'm saying. But the fact that there's some people in AEW, they're like, how could you say that, Jim? You've offended us. You've hurt our feelings. And Jim Ross is just like,
you know what's funny?
What the fuck is wrong with you people? Do you not understand how much wrestling not only has Jim Ross called, but how much wrestling Jim Ross has seen? The guy was a fucking talent scout for some of the best wrestlers in the history of WWE and WCW alone. Like, it's stupid to me that anybody would even have the audacity or gall to sit there and go, well, what the fuck does Jim Ross know? Everything. Jim Ross knows everything.